Deltarune is a game that has 7 chapters, but at the moment we only have 4. This leaves 3 more chapters left that we will have to wait for, and with chapter 5 coming out next year, this gives us plenty of time to theorize. Now, some people theorize small things such as the final message of the prophecy or Sans Undertale is actually Sans Deltarune. Some people go bigger, predicting the next chapter or even chapter 6. But no one has tried to predict the rest of the game in one whole video. At least, since chapters 3 and 4 were released. That's where I come in. You may have seen me from one of my shorts or even one of my videos, but most of you have never seen me before. So, to everyone who's seeing me for the first time, please like and subscribe, because I don't make long theories a lot, but if that's what you all want, then you shall receive. Anyways, for the one person who hasn't touched Deltarune since chapter 1, the second, third and fourth chapters have all been released with 3 chapters left, so I will be theorizing what will happen in said 3 chapters. So, let us wonder about the possible outcome of the future Deltarune chapters and see how this story could end. But before we get into that, we need to talk about the patterns the first 4 chapters have. Now, before chapters 3 and 4, there were many patterns such as the bosses being based on chess pieces, but those patterns have been discarded by the game. Well, except for 2. The first is the list pattern. This pattern revolves around all the characters on Gaster's list during the Goner Maker sequence, where if you type in certain names, he says, an interesting coincidence. All the characters on this list are the ones people speculate about being in the Dark World. This is proven by all the Lightners to end up in a Dark World are on the list. The biggest piece of evidence is the fact we got Jerson in a Dark World as the old man but no Alvin. This means all of these characters will visit a Dark World at some point or already have. That's one thing we'll keep in mind for the Dark Worlds. The next pattern has to do with the Dark Worlds paralleling the areas of Undertale in reverse order. Now, I could make an entire video on how the events in the Dark World parallels the events of what happens in that Undertale area, but I'll only make that video if enough of you want it. Starting off with chapter 1, the setting is quite old and the final boss is a king, just like in New Home. In chapter 2, the setting is sci-fi and the final boss is a robot like the core. Chapter 3 is based around minigames and the final boss is a game show host, and yes, I do consider Base Mettaton to be the final boss, since Muffet only exists because of a backer. Chapter 4 has a very blue setting in a literal way, and the final boss, while not being similar to Undyne at a first glance, can't die, just like her, even though they both still die. Well, that's a basic analysis on how the first 4 chapters parallel the Undertale areas in reverse order. Now that we've examined these 2 patterns, we can now finally get to predicting what the new chapters will be. Starting off with chapter 5, I have to tell you guys something important. You see, I already made a chapter 5 prediction video, and while I do think some of what I said was correct, I have different ideas for what I said in the theory. I'll let you know when this is though, so keep watching this video. Another thing about that video is the fact I didn't go too in-depth about it, which is clear by the length. So, if you've seen that video, thank you, but please watch this part to see my new ideas and also for viewer retention. Anyways, tangent aside, I think chapter 5 will have a flashback scene that takes place between this chapter and the last. It will probably be related to Sans and Toriel saying stuff. Then, Chris will wake up in Castletown. Now, in my original theory, I suggested we'll go to Susie's house and finally explore her place and discover her backstory. I don't think that anymore, because if her parents are abusive, she would go anywhere but there. My best guess is Castletown, since that's the only place that would be open at night. I'd assume she'd wake us up with Ralsei and explain what happened with her bringing Jackenstein to Castletown if he's alive. Then, we can explore all of Castletown and see our new recruits. After they leave, it would be sunrise and they would go outside and then see us door with the Bergen trick. Now, you may be wondering why he's here. Well, it's pretty simple. In chapter 5, Alvin says he goes to church at night. If that's the case, then why didn't we see him? Well, it was probably because he was preparing for the festival and he'd most likely be done by now. Seeing Chris and Susie outside, he'd question it. Susie would get Chris to say something stupid and then he'd just take them to church with him. The church section wouldn't be a section at all since he'd probably be in shock and leave in case there's a threat. On the way back, Score would ask Chris why they weren't at home and then he would discover the truth. Bone Man got to his wife first. He would then see Sans on the way since he left Toriel's house with her in a hangover. He would then try to run him over as a nod to the diss meme but would fail since Sans can teleport. This would go on until he reaches Flower King and drives into the Dark World, and that is how he, Chris and Susie will enter the Flower King Dark World when there's only one door. Now that we're talking about the Dark World of Chapter 5, we need to talk about how it relates to Snowdin. Starting off with the enemies, we have two regular enemies, one that appears if you kill Snowdrake, plain old Jerry, 5 dogs, along with a scrapped 6th, a secret fight against Glide which exists because of Kickstarter, the Switch exclusive Mad New fight and the battle against the Great Papyrus. Regarding the setting, Snowdin is very cold. There are also many puzzles and a bridge. The last thing I want to mention is Snowdin Town. So, how does all of this relate to Snowdin? Well, a place like Flower King can be cold in a figurative way, and the bridge could be to connect to different dark worlds in Flower King. I'll explain why I say this later. As for the dogs, I could see them being the 6 flowers since there are 6 dogs. With Glide, this is where I think we'll get Plant Woody from Woody Theory 2. I don't think he'll be the secret boss since these famade Woody characters are like Spamton, and while Spooky Dude said it could be possible since Tennu is like Spamton, I don't understand why would get another Spamton-like character. As for Mew Mew, Spooky Dude does this thing where he reviews theories sent by fans and one of the theories said a gramophone would be Mew Mew. I honestly agree with this since if Toriel had it, she would most likely throw it out since the divorce probably happened a long time before Sans even showed up. Now, as for the Great Papyrus, it's a Score since his prophecy sprite is referred to as Boss 3 in the game files, so he's definitely the main boss. As for he parallels Papyrus, both are two goobers who get manipulated by a force of greater evil, so it's definitely possible. As for the secret boss, it's Sans Deltrune. Now, if you remember what Jerson said, he said the vast garden is an inferno of jealousy. Now, while a Score will be jealous of Sans, seeing Sans in person in a dark world where he has power would definitely cause some concern. Also, the secret bosses of Chapter 3 are connected to Chris while the secret boss of Chapter 4 is connected to Susie. So that means the Chapter 5 secret boss is connected to Ralsei and both Ralsei and Sans are connected. Now, one more thing. When I mentioned the 6 flowers, some of you were most likely wondering about the 7th. Well, I think it's Floey Deltrune. You may be wondering how that parallels Undertale. Well, on the genocide route, Floey does the puzzles for you, so I could see there being an impossible puzzle that Floey solves for us. Now, that's out of the way. I can give you the plot of this dark world, then explain why that is. Starting off, Score will wonder what is up the place, and after a bit, he will get kidnapped by the night and will be absent for a pretty big part of the chapter. This is for 2 reasons. The first is Ralsei. You see, I think he will see Ralsei, but it won't be this early since a lot of things happen later on. The second is because he would absolutely help Chris at this point, and I doubt he'll get the old man or Noel treatment. Anyways, Ralsei will show up. Then they encounter some enemies, similar to the previous chapters. Eventually, we'll come across a puzzle that we won't have any idea on how to solve. That's when it suddenly gets solved and we encounter Floey. I feel like this would be his introduction since in Undertale, he comes off as a tutorial type character. He'll introduce himself then won't really appear unless you're stuck on a puzzle where he'll give you hints on how to solve it. Then, as we progress through this dark world, we'll encounter the other 6 flowers and they'll all be mini bosses, maybe even a boss rush. Either way, we won't be able to kill them. I think they'll all surround us since the dogs in Undertale would have still tried to kill us if they always knew we were human. This is where Elsa takes a page out of Susie and uses his version of the Rude Buster. It probably wouldn't be very effective and Susie will use hers and intentionally miss to scare the flowers away. Flowey would be impressed and tell Ralsei to use his buster more often. I think Ralsei will learn a Rude Buster-like move since he starts to appreciate it more and it would help him to grow some balls. After a bit, I think the knight would return and give them another climbing section. After this section, the knight would make them fall but they would be saved by some bones. Bones from none other than Sans Undertale himself. Now, you may how Susie reacts and Ralsei would tell her to calm down and it would work. After this, I think Sans would take them to some kind of house where he would stay with the other flowers. After a few puzzles, the fun gang would chase the knight into their other dark world, that being the one inside of here. This is because Snowdin has 2 parts. Snowdin the town and Snowdin the forest. Anyways, Chris and Susie seal the dark fountain and Sans gives them a key. Once they return, they enter the second, more deadly part of the dark world. Now that we're in the light world, Asgore will take the knight to the police station. If he's dead, Sans will take them. Meanwhile, Susie and Chris will take everyone to Castle Town. There you can see many new interactions, along with King possibly being free. Once we're done with Castle Town, Chris and Susie will explore their hometown to see if anyone's here and they'll find some people but everyone else will be at the festival which I think will be past this line. Once we're there, we'll have a lot of optional stuff to do. We'll see many faces such as Alphys, Metatron and even Asriel, but if I'm being honest, he'll definitely have a mandatory appearance at the festival. We might even have a little side story with Pizza Pants and maybe Nice Pants will be a thing. At some point though, Susie will be Noelle and Chris will be with Birdly. I think Asriel will have a chat with Toriel and also Rudy. Our perspective will be with Chris and Birdly, with Curdly becoming a thing and then Chris will close their eyes and think about what Susie and Noelle are up to. The scene will most likely be similar to the one in the dark world and Noelle might be a bit more open with her feelings towards Susie and might tell her about the ride in her dream. Once the ride is done, I think Noelle might finally admit to her crush on Susie and Susie will requite her love, with the two about to kiss when Noelle gets a phone call. She'll be curious at what it is at first and when she answers, the words that come out the phone will give her a heart attack. That being the news of Rudy having fallen down, which means he will soon perish. Noelle and Susie will rush to the place Rudy is with everyone else trying to help him. They'll try their hardest but eventually he'll die. Everyone will cry, even Susie because by this point, she's learned to care and have empathy for others. Even Chris will shed a tear. But then, while nobody's noticing, Chris will rip out their soul and make another dark fountain. Now, I absolutely need to explain my reasoning, so I will. Firstly, if the knight is defeated at Flower King, how will another dark world be opened? The best solution to this is Chris opening another dark fountain since Susie says they should and she doesn't know about what Chris did. Secondly, at this point only half of the characters on Gaster's list have ended up in a dark world so I could see Toby just chucking the unimportant characters in this dark world. Lastly, the concept of the Lightner being revived in a dark world is too juicy of a concept for Toby to not reuse and have it be foreshadowing. Now, if you watched my Chapter 5 theory, you'll remember me talking about a festival dark world. Well now, you'll hear some more things happening. Firstly, we'll see Asriel in a dark world and he'll look like Ralsei. Furthermore, I don't think Ralsei would even appear in this dark world because I think Noelle will be a replacement for Ralsei when she rejoins the party. I also think she'll spend some time with Rudy and have some fun with him, Susie, Chris and Asriel. I also think Toriel will teach us something we didn't know, whether it be a new mechanic or a guide about our stats. Alphys will probably have a pretty important role and might become more socially confident. As for the minor characters, Catty and Bratty will definitely become besties and finally get along like they do in Undertale. Catty with an eye and Jockington might be a minibus because of Susie, but after the fight, the two will be nicer to Susie. Then there's QC, who will probably be a shopkeeper like she is in Undertale, and maybe she'll have some character development. One unlikely possibility is the possibility of Tenna returning if you give him to Mettaton, but it's highly unlikely. So, what is the plot of the chapter? Well, while I'm less confident about this plot, I think Noelle will understand more about Dark Worlds and we'll learn more about her childhood and maybe even a confirmation on Disrael. But, as we all know, these Dark Worlds can't last forever, and at some point we'll have to seal it. Once we do, Noelle will wake up and see that her father isn't here. I think Susie will try to calm her down and tell her about Castletown, even suggesting to take Rudy there. Once we take Rudy to Castletown, though, I doubt everything will go as planned. You see, in Chapter 4 Ralsei says that they couldn't bring Jerson to Castletown, but we don't know what exactly happens. My crazy guess is that the roaring starts and all falls into chaos. Chris and Susie will get out of Castletown as soon as possible and run as far away as possible from town until they reach the shelter where they see the knight heading off to. They'll be fast enough to get in the shelter with the knight, escaping the roaring but possibly ending up in a place much worse. But before we talk about the 6th chapter, we'll talk about how the weird route goes. This is because I believe the theory that the weird route ends at chapter 5. Now, to refresh, the second Spanton sweepstakes showed us this image, which many people believe is how the weird route will go, with 1 and 3 being irrelevant, 2 being the most important, 4 having some minor changes to the route, and 5 having some pretty big changes, though not as much as chapter 2. Now, for the first Dark World in Flower King, I think there'll only be some minor changes just like chapter 3, but once we reach the festival, that's where things start to change. Firstly, rather than being with Susie, she'll go with Chris since she's in a trance thanks to the Thorn Ring. While those two are together, Susie will be with Asriel since she would absolutely want to know more about him. Eventually, the two will be on the Ferris wheel together, and Chris will absolutely hate it since they know Noelle wouldn't want this and Chris themselves might not want this. So, what happens afterwards? Well, I think Chris will force themselves and Noelle to go see Rudy before he dies. Now, I said in the normal route that Chris will open a Dark World, but I think they'll make sure to not open another Dark World since they know what the player will do. Now, from this part, the weird route will be quite dark, so if you don't want to know, then skip to this time. Starting off with our first dark thing, Chris will lose their hand. At first, it might not seem too dark, but I think Chris themselves will tear off their hand because they want to alter the prophecy in a way that doesn't put the people they care about in true danger. But the player on the hand, they will because they want to see what happens. If anyone does do weird route for that purpose, let me know so I don't look like an idiot. Anyways, I'm confident that the player will switch Chris with Noelle as their new vessel to control and play as, and with said so, Noelle will create a Dark World, this time using our determination to create her Dark World. However, unlike the normal Dark World where everyone has a nice time, I think this Dark World will be colder in a literal way, with everyone and everything being frozen because of Noelle. I think this because of the trance she's been put in with her wanting to freeze everything. As we progress, we might find an enemy or two that has yet to be frozen. I think out of all the characters, Jockington will survive and tell Noelle to snap out of the trance she's in. Of course, we, the player, won't listen and freeze Jockington, most likely using Snowgrave to finish him. I think everything will go smooth sailing until she shows up. When we first met her, she was a bully but learned how to become a nicer person and started becoming more of a hero. She's grown stronger, and thanks to an old man, she's now got more hope than ever to change fate in a good way. That would be none other than Susie. Susie, at this point, wants to save the world, and I have a feeling she'd know that something's definitely not right with Noelle. I have a feeling that we as the player will talk to her and tell her to proceed. This will annoy her to the point she'll fight us again, only this time she'll actually be trying to kill us. The fight will be a test to try and defeat someone who won't give up trying, and it'll absolutely be a hard battle. In the end, Swiss will freeze and we move to the fountain, only to see it frozen, and then Noelle freezes us in an attempt to seal the fountain, but we'll be stuck. We're not dead, so we can't go back. We're just stuck there, unable to make a different choice. We're soft-locked. So what now? If this is how it ends, what do we do now? Well, just like Undertale, I have a feeling if you wait long enough, we'll see someone again. Someone who we haven't seen since the beginning. None other than the vessel. It will talk to us and tell us about what happened to itself while we were playing the other chapters. After this speech, it will ask us for our soul, and when we give it, our weird root save file will be deleted. Now, it's time to talk about Chapter 6. If Undertale backwards theory applies to this, then the shelter would parallel the ruins. So, what happens in ruins? Well, in the ruins, we get introduced to Flowey and don't see him until the end. As for enemies, we have quite a lot of enemies in ruins, more than the other areas. The only mini-boss we have in ruins is Napstablook. Lastly, there's Toriel, the final boss of the ruins. There's also the dummy, but it probably exists to teach the player of the main mechanics and is more of a parallel to the training dummy Ralsei uses. Now, regarding the setting, the ruins is a pretty old place and the shelter Dark World seems to have been opened for a while, and if the vines mean anything, then that place is very old and the Dark World might be in ruin. Anyways, how would the plot of the story go? Well, starting off, I think Chris and Susie fall down in the shelter Dark World. Susie is weirded out by the setting, and then they go and meet a strange figure who hides in the shadows. The figure speaks to them and Susie tries to attack it, but then the light comes on to reveal Ralsei. Now, I'm not saying Ralsei is a parallel to Toriel. Instead, I think it's a trick because there is some evidence for Ralsei being Toriel, because Susie has said Ralsei looks like Toriel, so I wouldn't put it past Toby to do this. After that, we explore a little more and Ralsei explains a bit of the shelter but doesn't reveal everything too early. After this, Chris gets a phone call with someone who speaks in all caps telling the Fun Gang to meet them at the end of this Dark World. Susie tells us we should go to them, and so we do. Now, for the first part 1, imagine there'll be quite a few enemies who come after us at this part, but nothing too major happens. That is, until we're halfway there and meet someone who we've expected for a while. None other than Friend itself. Now, while we know next to nothing about Friend, we do know they're a cat, but it's certainly possible they could relate to Napstablook. I can't say for sure how because we know jack about them. I think they relate to the secret boss of this chapter, and I'll explain everything about the secret boss later. Anyways, this fight will have a new mechanic, similar to Jackenstein in Chapter 4, and just like the Jackenstein fight, this is actually just a tutorial for the final boss. Once we beat them, Friend will be on our side and give us something that will help us with puzzles, a rock. This rock will be like the one in Undertale, and it would help us find a secret part of this Dark World. This secret part will be about the secret boss of this chapter, which will be behind something, most likely a while, because I don't think they are necessarily trapped. In order to free them, you'll need to do some exploring and unlock this place. Once open, the heroes will go inside and find who's in there, and it turns out to be none other than Schwann. Now, you may wonder why they are here, and it all has to do with this one item, a pure crystal. Now, you may wonder what even is a pure crystal. Well, I think pure crystals are the thing that can allow a Darkner who's not a resurrected loved one to appear in another Dark World without turning into stone. This would explain why Schwann is here. Now, another question you might have is why would we get the pure crystal now? Well, the pure crystal is most likely what happens when you get all 5 shadow crystals and merge them into one. The reason I think we'd receive it now is because it would take time to fuse them all into one, and I highly doubt Sean will give it to Melius because they said they'd give Chris something nice. Of course, Sean will do some explaining and then give Chris the pure crystal, but Chris won't accept and instead try to fight. Why? Well, Chris knows more than they let on. One of these things could be the strength of the weapon, because there has to be a weapon better than the Black Shard, and that is really good. Another thing they might know is just how strong Sean is. Some evidence being the cat thing on Asriel's computer, which could mean they've seen how powerful that is and will try to make the player fight them. Then Sean probably says something and then decides to fight them since it could be fun. So we have Sean as the secret boss with them fighting against Chris. How will this fight go? First things first, I think Sean will turn Chris orange. This would make sense since we haven't seen the orange soul at all, and if orange represents bravery, then both Chris and Sean are brave since Sean had to deal with Javel, someone who's the literal definition of a powerhouse, and Chris has us, the player who uses them as a puppet and could ruin their whole life, which would freak out most people. But rather than screaming, Chris stays silent, something you do when you're brave. After that, the fight will probably be the hardest so far, and it would make sense Sean is very to not hold back in a fight since they locked up their closest companion, and there's a good chance they had to use a little bit of violence. The fight would most likely end when Sean is out of energy and tells Chris they put up a good fight and survived long enough. After that, Sean will give Chris their new weapon and the pure crystal, which would mean Sean would have to turn to stone, but they're confident Chris and the rest of the fun gang can put a stop to the roaring. Sometime in between, I think, we all get another egg room where we merge the eggs into one giant egg. Now, this will all make sense later, so don't worry. Now, for this part of the chapter, the heroes will battle more enemies and get some more phone calls from this mysterious person. At some point, the fun gang will encounter a block and they will have nowhere to go other than a city. This city will be full of the strongest enemies they've encountered, including more Titan spawn. This city-like area is like the one in the ruins, and I think Toby will give us an idea as to what the city looks like in Undertale. Eventually, we'll find our way past the blocked area, maybe because Ralsei and Susie are strong enough to break the board. Chris also could make use of their hidden X/move. Once that's done, we'll explore the place and discover a laboratory. This is where I think the true lab comes into play, because in Undertale, the true lab comes directly before the final area, and while it's in the middle, you do have to technically go through New Home first to get into true lab. The fun gang will explore the place and learn more about the Dark Worlds from entries. They'll find a basement and go down. As they walk, they hear someone talking to themselves. The voice will sound like the one they heard on the phone. As the heroes continue, the words that come out from the speaker's mouth become more interesting. Eventually, they finally meet the person, and Susie asks who they are, and it will pan out onto them, and that is when the man, the myth, the hand speaker himself shows up. None other than W.D. Gaster. Now, if you haven't gotten it yet, Gaster is a parallel to Toriel. For starters, both are related to hands, with Toriel using hands in her attack and Gaster speaks in hands. Furthermore, Toriel seems to be more competent than Asgore, and Gaster could have dated Rouxl's card since he does speak in hands but is a complete idiot. There is one more similarity between the two, but I'll bring it up if I bring it up in a bit, since it'll make more sense if I do. Gaster will have a monologue about how he's expecting us to arrive since it's mentioned in the prophecy, and he also explains what the end was. My theory is that Ralsei will have to die. He will then tell us that he too didn't want the prophecy to end like that. But he worries that the fun gang, and by extension, us, the player, aren't worthy of such a happy ending because there are many things we have forgotten. He then summons a certain someone to the room. The real version of Aram. Now, let me explain what I think Aram is and why I think he's here. Aram, in my opinion, isn't Ram or the Knight or John Mantle. Instead, I think he's his own character, similar to Friend. As to why he's even here in the first place, I think it has to do with his role, which I think is to be one of Gaster's goons, or as a better term, a follower. If you want to know what I think Gaster followers are, I think they're robots, and Aram's name might be due to them being a corrupted power strip which could be responsible for the Mantle minigames. Now, to properly answer the question, I think Aram is here to kill Ralsei. Now that's out of the way, I think we'll finally know what Ralsei is and why he has to die. Now, while piles of Asriel's dust is an option, I personally think it's a bit of a stretch for that to be the case. So, what's my theory? Well, while it's insane, it's still more likely than piles of Asriel's dust. My theory in question is Ralsei being the red headband and the green crayon combined with a pure crystal. As we know, both the red headband and the green crayon are missing, which has led to a lot of debates over which of these Asriel is, and I say why not both. If you're wondering which parts of Ralsei are which, I believe the red headband is Ralsei's body while the green crayon is Ralsei's clothes, since most darkners seem to be naked. As for the pure crystal, it's debatable what this is and whether it'll actually be in the game or not. As you've heard before, I definitely think the pure crystal will be included since it is the opposite of a shadow. As for what it does, I personally believe it does two things. The first is it having the ability to trap a lot of darkness inside it. Secondly, I think it's what allows darkness such as Ralsei to appear in multiple dark worlds without turning to stone. This is why I think Ralsei dying will save the world, since his death will grant a pure crystal which can be used to stop all of the darkness in Deltarune. Once all of that happens, I think the roaring will end, but it will be tragic since we spent a lot of time with Raslai and seeing him be sacrificed is certainly a tragedy. I assume Castle Town will be fine, but there's no prince to rule the kingdom. As for us, the players of the game, I think we'll be stuck in a black void, similar to the Undertale neutral endings, since the prophecy does say the angel will be banished and meet with its desires, and while we have already met him, I'm sure many of you would want to be with Gaster in a black void. Well, maybe not, but I am sure someone does. Anyways, credits roll, and at the end, Gaster tells us something important. That being the secrets we missed, such as the shadow crystals and the eggs. At the end, he'll tell that Deltarune is still waiting. And that's how a casual Chapter 6 playthrough ends. With that out of the way, we'll now talk about the special ending for those who spent the time getting the shadow crystals and eggs to combine them into one egg and one crystal. You also need to recruit everyone for the sake of kindness. If you do that, then the ending will change. Firstly, right before Aram kills Ralsei, Undyne intervenes, and in the process she loses her eye, which will parallel Undertale. Before Aram can hurt Undyne any further, a Gaster blaster comes, and it's him. This comes from none other than the Great Papyrus, who just used his special attack. Aram unleashes another attack, this time at Papyrus, but this time, since we recruited everyone, they save him as a way of saying thanks. Aram will try to unleash another attack, but Chris uses the power of the pure crystal to take out Aram. Being impressed, Gaster proposes an offer to us, the player. Beat him in a fight and we'll get an actual happy ending. The fight will be similar to Toriel's fight, with him also using hands as a form of attacking. In the end, Gaster will end the battle because we have proven ourselves worthy of a better ending. After another speech from him, we all go into a room that didn't exist before. It will be open and we'll enter. Once inside, Gaster will give Susie the Pen of Hope because he trusts her to write the ending, us and Chris to get to the ending, and Ralsei to make sure nothing goes wrong. He will then send us back to the world of the Roaring, where we'll be able to get a more desired ending. So, after what I just said, what is Chapter 7? Well, this chapter will be completely unexpected and contain content that wasn't foretold by time and space. This chapter throws out any sort of pattern the previous chapters gave us. Will there be a secret boss? Well, there is the Science Soul, which hasn't been touched yet, and it would make sense since it would make the whole patient part require patience. As for the boss itself, I think it's Susie's mum, since we haven't seen her at all. The reason I think it will be Susie's mum and not her dad is something I'll explain later. The boss will explain a bit of Susie's home life but won't get too much into detail. The reason I mention the secret boss now is because I actually have no idea when a secret boss would show up. If we beat her, Susie will get a cool weapon and we'll get another crystal, probably pure unless she has like 5 shadow crystals. The chapter will be about exploring the previous Dark Worlds and also saving the Lightners who had entered the previous Dark Worlds. This is where Asriel and Ralsei finally meet and then we have a little emotional cutscene. Once we're done with all of that, everyone will be gathered for one final battle against the final boss, the Vessel, which is here for vengeance. Now, for this to happen, the Vessel would have to have originally been the cage and I think that's likely. After the little speech, everyone will be on a cart to parallel chapter 2. Now, you might wonder why that's the case. Well, I think that for 2 reasons. 1. The Ferris wheel scene was foreshadowing, so that scene could also be foreshadowing. The second reason is because I want it to happen and since we know Jack about this chapter, it's certainly possible. The final fight will be a battle for freedom versus control. The Vessel, born without free will and born in a world where freedom is an illusion, up against the Delta Warriors and the allies who want to defy fate. The battle will be tough, but once we beat it, the Vessel will still keep fighting. Ralsei has an idea. You see, the Vessel is a cage with a human soul, but I don't think the Vessel actually does. This is where Ralsei will try to sacrifice himself to save the worlds, but the Great Papyrus, who is the Forgotten Man, doesn't want Ralsei to experience what he has by being forgotten, so he sacrifices himself and Sense comes along with him, both of them taking a huge chunk of power from the soul and the Vessel. Once they sacrifice themselves, the Vessel still lives but is much more weakened. Chris, Susie and Ralsei will all say something to it and Susie will most likely have a scene where she makes a comment about storytelling as a whole. Chris then gives the Vessel us and they give Chris their original soul in exchange for us. Once that's done, we go back to the light world where the world has been restored to normal. Of course, those who died are still dead, but the world is happier than ever and now anyone can go to Castle Town where they can forget their real-world responsibilities. Once we're done talking to everyone, us inside the Vessel will go look for Gaster, who seemed to have gone missing. We then learn what really happened to him by watching some tapes and then we cut to credits where we see the life of everyone who we've met on our adventures after we saved the world. I also think there'd be an end credit cutscene where we'd see Susie and Co having a party, presumably Susie's birthday, and once the party is over, Susie will make a wish. The wish will be about learning more, finding out what people have been hiding from her. This wish would be to go back and learn about what happened in the past. That is a wish that we, the player, would have for more content, and then the voice that we heard in the beginning will call to us and entertain our desire to know what happened before the story begins, and that is what takes us to Chapter 0. Now, the idea of Chapter 0, while seeming unlikely, has a better chance than there being a Chapter 8. Now, if you did watch the old All Chapters prediction, I made the claim that we'd have to unlock Chapter 8, but it seems that we'll have to unlock Chapter 7 instead. Now, for Chapter 0, there's more evidence supporting it with it appearing in the game files, and it'd be weird for Chapter 0 to be there if it wasn't going to be used. After hopefully convincing you all about Chapter 0 being a thing, what will happen in it? Well, it being Chapter 0 means it's a prequel chapter, and it being a prequel means that it's going to have some juicy lore. But before that, who are we going to play as? Well, my best guess is us, the soul, traveling around hometown, seeing the good old days and seeing everyone so full of life. Eventually, we'll come across Susie and we'll get more info on what made her the person she became in Chapter 1. The secret boss, yes, I think there'll be one, is Ram. This is because we never got a Ram fight and I think this would be the perfect time to use the Purple Soul. The fight will be similar to Fan Midram fights but will have some unique things such as lore, attacks and the way we all get to fight him. I have no idea what we'll get from him but I'm sure it'll be good. Another major thing that will happen in this chapter is Chris and Co going into the shelter where they follow the pointed tail. As we follow them, we will find an early version of the vessel and we pilot it like a puppet. We'll encounter many enemies, both new and old. Once we're done encountering enemies, we'll meet Chris and Co and also Aram and create the shelter Dark World. This Dark World will be like the one in chapter 6, but we'll have Chris and Co with us. Once we progress enough, we'll come across Aram and friend again. This time, Gaster will be there, holding a sword. This sword is the sword he uses to kill Dis and then it's a chase scene. We run until we reach a dead end. Gaster is on the verge of killing us, but a trident is thrown at him, morphing his face. The trident is from none other than Asgore who comes to save them. The gang ran out of the shelter and Asgore locked it up. Eventually, word of Dis disappearing spreads through town and the kids are too traumatized to say what happened. The only one who says what happens is Asgore, but his story is so absurd no one believes it. Eventually, Susie hears of the news and wants to explore the bunker herself, but her dad doesn't let her. This is who I think the final boss is and why he's not a secret boss. The battle will be about freedom versus control like in chapter 7, only this time control wins and Susie forgets about the shelter. She then goes into her room and wishes for things to change, with the credits rolling and everyone getting really emotional. Now that I've given you a whole recap, I'm going to give a whole summary of all the chapters. So, starting from the beginning, a strange voice forces us to make a vessel. Once we're done, the vessel gets discarded and we play as Chris. They go to school and get bullied by Susie. After being sent on a mission, the duo enter a strange world and meet Ralsei, who tells them they're heroes. Susie does her own thing and teams up with Lancer. Eventually, she and Lancer learn how to become better people and Susie starts to care about other people. They then encounter a strange prisoner who's named Javel and they tire him out. Eventually, they meet the king and battle him. He loses and gets betrayed by his own people. Chris and Susie seal the fountain and head home. The next day, they visit Castletown and find another Dark World in the library. They meet Ralsei, Noel and Birdley, who work for the Queen. Noel gets some time with Chris and the two remember the good old days. Chris eventually meets Spanton and they later get captured by Queen and explore her mansion where Chris finds a disc and then they go back, only to find Spanton Neo and break his strings. Susie then spends some time with Noel then goes to stop Queen, but then she gets out her final form and defeats the heroes, only to stop when she learns about the roaring. Chris and Susie seal another dark fountain and have a sleepover. They then wake up in a new Dark World and meet Ralsei again. He then yaps and we meet Mr. Tenna who gives us fun games. Once we're done, we play the original game and play round 2, only to play the original game. We then find Trill but Tenna has a crush out. We manage to escape him but now we have to hide. We play the original game and come across Aram. We manage to get to the fountain but we fight Tennu and then promise to find a new home for him, only for him to die to the night. We get close to beating it but ultimately lose. Undine comes and tries to save the day but gets taken into the shelter. The next day we go to church, then to Noel's, then back to church, then meet an old man who's Jerson Boom and eventually fight him, then seal the fountain. Susie makes another fountain, which gets sealed and then we enter the third sanctuary, defeat a titan and come home to Sans banging up Toriel. The very next day, Asgore ends up in a dark world and loses his mind over Sans. Speaking of Sans, we fight him and later Asgore, who assists us in defeating the knight who we finally see. The festival happens and some romance happens, but love turns to tragedy when Rudy dies and Chris makes a dark world with several NPCs in it. We see Rudy and Jockington grows the beard, but all good things come to an end when we seal the fountain. Noelle starts the roaring so she can't see her father, and we go into the shelter. In the shelter we encounter many creatures. The only harmless one is Seam, who we fight, and after the fight he turns to stone. A long time later we explore a laboratory and see Gaster with Aram, and then Papyrus shows up and saves the day. We then prove to Gaster we can make a better ending, so chapter 7 happens where we write a better ending where we fight Susie's mum and the skeleton bros die. Then Gaster asks us about the past and we see the past where we get to fight Rem and Susie's dad. We also discover what exactly happens to Dis, and then everyone lives happily ever after except for Sans. Well, looks like I'm finally done with this script. Now, there are some problems with this theory, such as the lack of alphys and not mentioning who the knight is, but it is what it is. In case you're wondering, this script has been in the works for a while, so don't expect another video as long as this. As a reminder, 10 like and I'll make the parallel video. Also, sorry for the lack of editing, but you shouldn't expect a long video to have lots of editing. Anyways, like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.